The dust swirled in angry red clouds across the barren landscape as Charlotte Prescott stumbled forward, one hand clutching her empty canteen, the other pressed against her hollow stomach. 3 days without proper food and nearly a full day without water had left her delirious, her vision swimming with each desperate step along the sun-baked trail. Montana Territory, 1875. Charlotte had never imagined she would end up here alone, desperate, and dying beneath the merciless western sun. The stagecoach had been attacked 2 days prior, the driver and her fellow passengers gunned down by bandits who took everything of value, including her provisions. By some miracle, they had overlooked her, hidden as she was beneath the overturned coach. But survival had come at a cost, and now she was paying it with every painful step. Her legs finally gave out as the sun reached its zenith. Charlotte crumpled to the dirt, her face pressing against the warm earth, the taste of dust coating her cracked lips. This was it, she thought. This was how Charlotte Prescott, former Boston schoolteacher and would-be ranch owner, would die alone in the wilderness, her dreams dying with her. As consciousness faded, she thought she heard the rhythmic pounding of hooves against hard-packed earth. A hallucination, surely. Her mind's final comfort before darkness claimed her. Dust kicked up around Daniel Jackson's boots as he dismounted from his chestnut mare. He'd been tracking a small herd of strays when he spotted what looked like a heap of fabric on the trail ahead. Approaching cautiously, rifle-at-the-ready bandits were known to use all manner of tricks in these parts. He realized with a start that it was a woman. "Madam." He called, keeping his distance at first. When she didn't respond, he moved closer, crouching beside her still form. Her face was streaked with dirt and dried tears, her breathing shallow. She was alive, but barely. Daniel holstered his rifle and gently turned her over. She was young, probably mid-20s, with fair skin now reddened by the sun and hair the color of wheat that had fallen loose from what must have once been a tidy arrangement. Her clothes were torn and dusty, but of good quality, not a local then. "Miss, can you hear me?" He touched her cheek lightly, noting the heat of her skin. Sunstroke, dehydration, she needed help quickly. When she remained unresponsive, Daniel made his decision. Hungry and collapsed beside the road, the cowboy lifted her gently and carried her home. She weighed almost nothing in his arms as he settled her carefully across his saddle, before mounting behind her, one arm securely around her waist, as he turned his horse toward the Triple J Ranch. His family's modest spread 15 miles to the east. Charlotte's first awareness was of something cool against her lips. Water. She gulped desperately, choking slightly as a strong hand pulled the cup away. "Easy now," a deep voice cautioned. "Small sips or you'll make yourself sick." She forced her eyes open, blinking against the dim light of an unfamiliar room. A man sat beside her, his features coming slowly into focus, broad shoulders, strong jawline shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of the Montana sky. "Where am I?" Her voice emerged as a cracked whisper. "Triple J Ranch, my ranch," he amended. "I found you collapsed on the Bitter Creek Trail. I'm Daniel Jackson." Charlotte tried to sit up but found herself too weak. "Charlotte Prescott," she managed. "Thank you for saving me." Daniel nodded, offering the water again. "What happened to you, Miss Prescott? Not many folks wander these parts alone, especially not ladies from." He hesitated, studying her. "Back east, I'm guessing." "Boston," she confirmed, taking careful sips. "The stagecoach was attacked. I was the only." Her voice broke. "The only one who survived." Daniel's expression darkened. "Reynolds' gang, most likely. They've been hitting stages along that route for months." He stood, his tall frame almost touching the low ceiling of what Charlotte now realized was a simple but clean bedroom. "You're safe now. My housekeeper, Mrs. Bryan, helped get you cleaned up and changed. You've been unconscious for nearly a day." Charlotte glanced down, noticing she wore a plain cotton nightgown. Heat rose to her cheeks at the thought of strangers attending to her while she was unconscious, but gratitude quickly overwhelmed her embarrassment. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks. Rest now. We can talk more when you're stronger." As Daniel moved toward the door, Charlotte called out, "Mr. Jackson, my belongings." He paused, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Miss Prescott. You had nothing but the clothes on your back when I found you." Charlotte closed her eyes, fighting tears. Everything was gone: her money, her papers, even the deed to her uncle's property that had brought her west in the first place. All she had left were the clothes she had arrived in, now likely unwearable. "We'll figure something out," Daniel said, his voice gentler than she would have expected from a man of his rugged appearance. "But first, you need to heal." After he left, Charlotte allowed the tears to come, silent and hot. She had lost everything, but she was alive, and for that, she owed Daniel Jackson more than she could ever repay. 3 days passed before Charlotte was strong enough to leave her bed for more than a few minutes at a time. Mrs. Bryan, a stout Irish woman with a kind face and firm hands, helped her bathe properly and provided a simple dress that had belonged to Daniel's sister before she married and moved to California. "It's a bit large," Mrs. Bryan said apologetically as she pinned the waist, "but it'll do until we can get you something proper." "It's perfect," Charlotte insisted, smoothing the faded blue fabric. "I can't express how grateful I am." Mrs. Bryan waved away her thanks. "The master doesn't often bring home strays of the human variety, but he's got a good heart. Always has, even after everything he's been through." Charlotte's curiosity piqued. "Everything he's been through?" Mrs. Bryan pressed her lips together, clearly regretting her words. "Not my place to say, miss. Come now, let's get you downstairs. Mr. Jackson says you're to join him for dinner tonight if you're feeling up to it." The main room of the ranch house was larger than Charlotte had expected, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and simple but sturdy furniture arranged for comfort rather than style. A long table stood near the kitchen doorway, already set for dinner. Daniel rose from his chair as she entered, and Charlotte was struck again by his height and the breadth of his shoulders. Cleaned up and in fresh clothes, he looked less intimidating than he had when she first awoke, though no less imposing. "Miss Prescott," he greeted her, pulling out a chair. "It's good to see you on your feet." "Thanks to your care," she replied, taking the offered seat. "I understand I've been imposing on your hospitality for several days now." Daniel sat across from her as Mrs. Bryan brought out a pot of stew and a loaf of fresh bread. "It's no imposition. We don't get many visitors out here, especially not." He cleared his throat. "Well, Mrs. Bryan appreciates the female company," Charlotte smiled, noting how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he returned the gesture. Despite his obvious strength and the calloused hands that spoke of hard work, there was a gentleness to Daniel Jackson that intrigued her. Over dinner, Charlotte explained her journey west. Her uncle, her only living relative, had died 6 months earlier, leaving her his small ranch near Helena. "I've never seen it," she admitted. "Uncle Frederick moved west when I was just a child. We corresponded regularly, but I always thought I'd visit someday, not inherit the place." "And now?" Daniel asked, refilling her water glass. Charlotte's fingers twisted in her lap. "The deed was in my luggage. Without it, I have no proof the property is mine. I had everything, all my savings, my identification papers." Her voice faltered. "The law office in Helena would have records," Daniel suggested. "Once you're fully recovered, I can take you there." "I couldn't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask, I offered." His tone brooked no argument. "Besides, I have business in Helena next week. It's no trouble." Later that evening, as Charlotte sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold, she heard Daniel's footsteps behind her. "It's beautiful," she said as he joined her on the bench. "I never imagined Montana would be so vast." "That's why I never left," he replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Tried once after the war, made it as far as St. Louis before I turned around and headed back." He glanced at her. "Your uncle's place is good land, small but good grazing, decent water rights. You planning to work it yourself?" Charlotte laughed softly. "Hardly. I was hoping to sell it, use the money to open a school somewhere." "You're a teacher," she nodded. I taught at a girls' academy in Boston for 5 years." She hesitated, then admitted, "But after what happened on the trail, I'm not sure I want to return east anymore. Everything feels different now." Daniel was silent for a long moment. "Near death has a way of changing perspectives," he finally said. "After Shiloh, I couldn't look at anything the same way again." Charlotte studied his profile, noting the way his jaw tightened at the mention of the battle. "You fought in the war, Union cavalry, joined up at 18, came home at 22 feeling like I'd aged a lifetime." He shook his head slightly, as if clearing away unwanted memories. My father died while I was away. My mother followed a year after I returned, left me and my sister Alice to run this place. And now your sister's in California, Daniel nodded. Married a banker, they have 2 boys now. A smile softened his features. Alice writes every month, always asking when I'm going to find myself a wife and stop living like a solitary old bear, as she puts it. Charlotte found herself smiling in return. And what do you tell her? That there aren't many women lining up to marry cowboys in the middle of nowhere, Montana. His eyes met hers, surprisingly warm in the fading light. At least, not until they start falling out of the sky onto dirt roads. Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks, and not from the lingering effects of her sunburn. For the first time since the attack, she felt something other than fear and despair, a flutter of something that felt dangerously like hope. The next morning, Charlotte ventured to the barn, where she found Daniel mending tack. He worked with a quiet efficiency that spoke of years of practice, his large hands surprisingly dexterous with the small tools. "Mrs. Byron said I might find you here," she said by way of greeting. "I wanted to ask if there's anything I can do to help around the ranch. I can't just sit idle while you and Mrs. Byron do everything." Daniel looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "You're still recovering, Miss Prescott." "Charlotte," she corrected him, "and I'm well enough to be useful. I may not know much about ranching, but I can learn quickly." Daniel set aside his work, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "Most Eastern ladies I've met would consider it beneath them to work on a ranch." "I'm not most Eastern ladies," Charlotte replied, lifting her chin. "And I'm in your debt." A slow smile spread across his face. "No, I don't suppose you are," he considered for a moment. "Can you ride?" "Not well," she admitted, "but I'm willing to learn that too." That afternoon found Charlotte atop a gentle mare named Daisy, with Daniel walking alongside, giving instructions as they circled the corral. Her muscles protested the unfamiliar exercise, but Charlotte gritted her teeth against the discomfort, determined to prove herself capable. "You're a natural," Daniel commented as she successfully guided Daisy through a simple pattern of turns. "Tomorrow we'll try a short trail ride, get you used to being in the saddle for longer periods." By the end of the week, Charlotte had settled into a routine at the Triple J. Mornings were spent helping Mrs. Byron with household tasks, afternoons dedicated to riding lessons and learning about the operation of the ranch. Evenings brought dinner with Daniel and often long conversations on the porch afterward, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. She learned that Daniel had built most of the furniture in the house himself during the long winter months, that he could quote Shakespeare despite never finishing school, and that he hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Boston, her dream of running her own school someday, and her secret love of dime novels about the West which, she admitted with a laugh, had given her entirely unrealistic expectations of frontier life. "You mean we don't all spend our days in shootouts and rescuing damsels in distress?" Daniel teased, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, you did rescue one damsel," Charlotte pointed out, "so perhaps they're not entirely fiction." Their trip to Helena was scheduled for the following week. As the day approached, Charlotte found herself experiencing conflicting emotions. She was eager to settle her uncle's affairs, but the thought of leaving the Triple J, of leaving Daniel, created an unexpected ache in her chest. The night before their departure, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She slipped downstairs, thinking to make herself a cup of tea, and found Daniel seated at the table, a lamp burning low beside him as he studied what appeared to be account books. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked without looking up. "Too much on my mind," she admitted, filling the kettle. "Would you like some tea?" He closed the ledger. "Please." They sat in companionable silence as the water boiled, the familiar domestic scene feeling both comforting and bittersweet to Charlotte. She'd grown accustomed to these quiet moments, to the solid presence of this man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "Daniel," she began, setting his cup before him, "I've been thinking about what happens after Helena." He met her gaze steadily. "And what have you decided?" "That's just it, I haven't." She curled her fingers around her cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. A month ago, everything seemed so clear. Sell the property, use the money to start fresh somewhere. But now, he prompted when she fell silent. Charlotte took a deep breath. Now I'm not sure I want to leave Montana after all. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, hope, perhaps. The territory grows on you, he said carefully. It's not just the territory. Charlotte gathered her courage. Daniel, these past weeks, I've never felt so alive, so purposeful. And I think a lot of that is because of you. Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Charlotte, a sudden pounding at the door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Daniel rose quickly, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Stay here, he instructed, moving toward the door. The visitor turned out to be one of Daniel's ranch hands, a young man named Timothy, his face urgent in the lamplight. Sorry to disturb you, boss, but Reed's back from town with news. Marshall's gathering a posse. The Reynolds gang hit another stage yesterday, killed 3 people. Daniel's expression hardened. Where? Just outside Helena. Marshall thinks they're holed up in the old Blackwater mine. Charlotte gasped softly and both men turned toward her. That was the gang that attacked my stagecoach, she explained, her heart racing. I might be able to identify them. Daniel shook his head firmly. No, absolutely not. I'm not involving you in this. I'm already involved, Charlotte insisted. I might be the only surviving witness. Timothy shifted uncomfortably. Marshall's offering a substantial reward, boss, and they did kill Mrs. Patterson's boy who was driving the stage. Daniel's jaw worked as he considered this information. Mrs. Patterson was the widow who ran the local way station. Her son had been barely 20. Tell Reed I'll ride out at first light. We'll meet the marshal in Helena as planned. After Timothy left, Charlotte confronted Daniel. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous. It's my testimony that could help catch these men, she argued, and we were going to Helena anyway. I'll speak to the marshal, then stay in town while you join the posse. Daniel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. These men are killers, Charlotte. If they realized you survived, all the more reason to stop them before they hurt anyone else. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. Please, Daniel, I need to do this. For those who didn't survive. He covered her hand with his own, his expression torn between admiration and concern. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, he said finally. But I won't let anything happen to you. I promise. The journey to Helena the next day was tense, both from the urgency of their mission and the unfinished conversation from the night before. They traveled with 3 of Daniel's most trusted hands, making good time despite Charlotte's still developing riding skills. Helena was larger than Charlotte had expected, a proper city grown from mining roots, with brick buildings and boardwalks replacing the tent city it had once been. They headed directly for the marshal's office, where a crowd had already gathered. Marshal James Reynolds, no relation to the gang, as he was quick to point out, was a grizzled man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Charlotte described the attack on her stagecoach, occasionally stopping her to clarify details. You say there were 5 men, he asked. You're certain? Charlotte nodded. 4 on horseback, 1 driving the stagecoach. They used to escape with the strongbox and luggage. And you could identify them, 2 of them, definitely. The leader tall, with a scar across his chin, and a younger man with red hair. The marshal exchanged a significant look with Daniel. That'd be Ellie Reynolds and his brother Jasper. They're the brains of the outfit. He turned back to Charlotte. Miss Prescott, your testimony is valuable, but I can't ask you to put yourself in further danger. She'll be staying in town, Daniel said firmly. Under guard, the marshal nodded. The posse rides at dawn. We've got 20 men already, including some of the mining company's security. With your boys, that makes 24. As they left the marshal's office, Daniel arranged for Charlotte to stay at the Helena Hotel, the nicest establishment in town. I've asked for a room at the back of the building, he told her as they climbed the stairs. Just to be safe. And I'm leaving Reed here to keep an eye on things. Inside the modest but clean room, Charlotte turned to Daniel, suddenly aware that this might be the last time they spoke privately. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Daniel, about last night, I know, he interrupted gently. And there's much I want to say to you, Charlotte, but not now, not like this. He took her hands in his. When I come back, we'll talk properly. About your uncle's ranch, about Montana, about us. Charlotte's heart skipped at the word us. She squeezed his hands. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. His eyes held hers for a long moment before he released her hands and stepped back. Get some rest. Tomorrow, while we're gone, you can visit the land office about your uncle's property. That night, Charlotte barely slept, her mind alternating between worry for Daniel and planning for her future, a future that she realized with clarity. She wanted to include him. Dawn came too quickly. From her window, Charlotte watched the posse gather in the street below, 24 men checking weapons and tightening saddle girths. Daniel's tall figure was easy to spot among them, his shoulders straight and determined as he conferred with the marshal. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up toward her window. Charlotte raised her hand in farewell, receiving a solemn nod in return before he mounted his horse and the posse rode out. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Charlotte visited the land office as planned, where she was relieved to discover that her identity could be verified through correspondence between her uncle and his lawyer. By mid-afternoon, she had provisional papers confirming her ownership of the Frederick Prescott property, pending formal documentation from Boston. She was returning to the hotel when she noticed a commotion near the general store. A group had gathered around a dusty rider who appeared to have just arrived in town. Posse caught up with the Reynolds gang at the mine, the man was saying as Charlotte approached. Turned into a proper shootout. 3 of the gang dead, the rest surrendered. Any casualties on our side? Someone asked, the rider nodded grimly. 2 men wounded, 1 pretty bad. They're bringing him in now, should be here within the hour. Charlotte's heart seemed to stop. Who? She asked, pushing forward. Who was injured? The man shrugged. Don't know names, one of the ranchers, I heard. Charlotte spent the next hour in agony, pacing the hotel lobby until finally, the sound of approaching horses drew her outside. The posse was returning, their faces grim but triumphant. 3 men with bound hands rode in the center of the group, the captured gang members. Charlotte scanned the riders desperately until she spotted Daniel near the back. Relief flooded through her until she realized he was supporting another man who slumped against him, a bloodied bandage visible around his torso. She rushed forward as they dismounted. Daniel, are you all right? He looked up, exhaustion evident in his face, but his eyes brightened at the sight of her. Charlotte, I'm fine. It's Timothy who caught a bullet. The young ranch hand managed a weak smile as Daniel and another man helped him toward the doctor's office. Just a scratch, miss. Like hell it is, Daniel muttered. Doc Peterson will see to him, he told Charlotte. The bullet went clean through, thank God. Once Timothy was in the doctor's care, Daniel finally allowed himself to truly look at Charlotte. She was struck by the intensity in his gaze, as if he were memorizing her features. The marshal has your testimony, he said. Combined with the stolen items we recovered, it's more than enough to send the remaining gang members to prison for a long time. And my uncle's property, he asked. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Good news, I hope. It's mine, she confirmed, though I'll need to decide what to do with it. Daniel glanced around at the busy street. Not here, he said quietly. Come back to the hotel, we need to talk. In the privacy of the hotel's small dining room, over cups of strong coffee, Daniel finally spoke the words that had been interrupted the night before. I've thought about this more than I should admit, he began. About what it means that I found you on that road, about why I couldn't just take you to town and be done with it. He met her gaze directly. I've been alone for a long time, Charlotte. I thought that was how it would always be, how it should be, but these past weeks, having you at the Triple J. He took a deep breath. I don't want you to leave, Charlotte's heart swelled. I don't want to leave either. Your uncle's ranch borders my northern pasture, Daniel continued. I knew Frederick not well, but we helped each other out occasionally. It's good land, like I said, but it needs work. Are you offering to buy it? Charlotte asked, confusion creeping into her joy. Daniel shook his head. No, I'm offering to help you work it, to combine our properties, our lives. He reached across the table for her hand. Charlotte, I know it's fast, and maybe I'm a fool for asking, but would you consider staying in Montana? With me? Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of happiness. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I would consider that very much. Daniel's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'm not a man of many words," he said, "but I need you to know that I've fallen in love with you, Charlotte Prescott, completely and irrevocably." "And I with you," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "When you found me on that road, I thought my life was ending. I never imagined it was just beginning." They were married 2 weeks later in Helena, with Mrs. Byron, the ranch hands, and the marshal in attendance. Charlotte wore a new dress of pale blue, purchased with the reward money she received for her testimony against the Reynolds gang. As they rode back to the Triple J now to be joined with the Prescott property under the new name of Sunrise Ranch, Charlotte reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as the worst day of her life had led to the best. Daniel seemed to read her thoughts. "Penny for them?" he asked as they crested the ridge that overlooked what was now their combined property. "I was just thinking about fate," she replied, "how sometimes the worst circumstances can lead to the greatest happiness." Daniel reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "I used to think finding you was luck," he said. "Now I know it was destiny." As the sun set behind them, painting the valley in golden light, Charlotte knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home not in a place, but in the heart of the man beside her. The man who, hungry and collapsed beside the road, had lifted her gently and carried her home.